Hi, I'm Kim Warden, and today I'll be talking about the term cognition. I have heard the word cognition in a psychology class that I have taken in the past. According to experts, cognition can technically be defined as the process of knowing, including attending, remembering, and reading. It can also be defined as the context of these processes, such as concepts and memories. In simple terms, cognition refers to the study of the mental process of thinking. Cognition depends on several key points, such as attention, memory, reasoning, and knowing. Cognition refers to cognition psychology. Other fields, such as neuroscience, philosophy, and linguistics, are related to the cognitive department of psychology. This branch of psychology arose in the 1950s due to behavioralism critics. People were curious as to how internal processes influence behavior. This gave rise to the name of the cognitive revolution. How the biological dimension affects cognition. Biology plays an important part in a person's thinking and understanding of concepts of information. Cognition not only changes with age, but it is also influenced by biological processes in the brain. Specific areas of the brain, such as the frontal lobe, the hippocampus, and the amygdala, are related with planning, self-awareness, and memory consolidation. If an individual receives brain damage from an injury, the personality can permanently or temporarily change due to the physical changes of their brain. It is a high possibility that their mental process will never be the same as it was before. In general, there are various factors that influence and affect the cognitive processes, such as age, education, gender, health factors, social activities, occupation, genetics, and more. Biological dimensions can affect cognition by causing cognition impairments or improvements. Many factors can affect cognition in a negative or a positive way. How the social-cultural dimension affects cognition. The term social-cultural refers to social and cultural aspects. This dimension, according to scholars, explores the impacts of social and cultural environments on a person's behavior and mental process. Race, ethnicity, religion, social class, and family traditions all have a significant impact. Famous researcher Lev Semyonovich Vygotsky developed a theory that children utilize three cultural tools to inform their cognitive abilities. He greatly emphasized that social interactions play a huge role in the cognitive development in children. He also greatly informs other researchers that an individual's mental development process can differ from another individual's mental development process based on different cultures that they were exposed to as a young age. How the two dimensions relate to my learning style and preferences. As a college student, I have my own personal learning style and preferences, such as using visual and auditory styles. Visual learning styles consist of pictures, graphs, maps, and charts for history or mathematics courses. Sometimes I have to see or visualize a math concept using a graph or a drawing to solve the problem better. This shows that my brain functions better and easier, not to just my age, but to the type of environment and concepts that I am exposed to. Oral, or best known as auditory learning, which includes music, audio tape, or a recorded lecture from a tape recorder. Why is the social-cultural dimension important to the learning process? The socio-cultural dimension is vital to the learning process because it underlines that the established learning process within people, such as children, is primarily a social process between people and their surroundings. Individuals must actively interact with new concepts and information in order to learn and process them. Why is the biological dimension important to the learning process? The biological dimension is important to the learning process because it shows how simple physical, chemical, neurological, or genetic conditions can affect a person's mental and learning process. Most importantly, certain cognitive impairments can lead to learning disorders or difficulties. A factor like genetics can also determine and limit how a child learns and thinks. In order for children to learn and become successful, it is critical to focus on their physical, cognitive, environmental, and social needs during their early childhood development. Evaluate the human biological processes of genetics. The factor that I chose related to cognition is genetics. Genes are a biological factor that directly affect cognition and its process. In a way, genes can also be closely grouped to cognitive factors, which refer to characteristics of an individual that affect performance learning. These factors are internal to each person and serve to modulate behavior and responses to stimuli. These factors are made to modulate performance, whether good or bad. Simply, biological processes are a necessity for living organisms to live and function. They mainly consist of chemical reactions. According to researchers, there are three pillars of genetics which explain the aspects of how living organisms like us are able to function and how the processes of life can be investigated. Within the third pillar, genetics provides scientists ways to research biological processes of human beings. Genetics influence an organism's biological process of development, such as cognitive, environmental, and more sections of development. Genetics can be utilized to see how organisms think or learn. The human biological processes of genes plays an essential role and has a great influence on a person's physical characteristics to behavioral patterns and cognitive intelligence and motivation. A person's biological process can have major influences on their mental development. For example, one of the biological processes of humans, such as reproduction, is when a sperm cell combines with a female's ovum cell to create an embryo. The embryo gets half of its genes from its mother and father. In some cases, genetic abnormalities occur and chromosomes are not divided evenly, which can lead to disabilities and conditions like Down syndrome. A simple DNA or error in a human's biological process can have a big impact on an individual's genetic condition, physical condition, and mental condition. Explain how biological processes may impact learning disorders. Learning disorders or disabilities in people, especially children, can come from a cause of abnormal genetic, biological, or neurological disturbances in the brain. These disturbances can permanently change a person's brain function. Learning disabilities can also be grouped as cognitive impairments. There are many types of learning disabilities and disorders. According to researchers, learning disorders or disabilities are due to genetic and neurobiological factors that change brain functionality, which affects cognitive processes relating to learning and thinking. Learning disorders cannot be cured or permanently fixed. They are lifelong conditions. Examples of learning disorders are ADHD, dyslexia, dyscalculia, dysgraphia, autism, and more. What are some cultural considerations for college students? Some cultural considerations for college students can be, for example, attending college parties, young females that are expected to join sorority clubs on their first day of freshman year, rooting for your college sport team such as football or lacrosse or soccer, wearing college logos, or wearing your college colors such as red, blue, black, or green. discuss how cultural values or beliefs may impact genetics. According to Jason, a fellow researcher, culture and genetics are ordinarily seen as two separate concepts. But then other researchers began to see that they are actually connected. Scientists call it gene-culture coevolution. As an example, 1,000 years ago, our ancestors could not handle drinking milk, but as the culture of dairy farming and milk drinking came into play, people could finally acquire the ability of lactose tolerance. This situation shows that as time goes by, our genes within us slowly adapt and evolve according to our surroundings and modern culture. Another example is between malaria and yam farming. In the culture of yam farming, trees are cut down, which in turn increases the breeding ground of malaria-carrying mosquitoes in Africa. Surprisingly, communities that have high rates of yam farming also have high rates of the sickle cell gene. Due to a unique biological oddity, sickle cell disease can protect a person against malaria by adapting. In areas of high malaria rate, especially Africa, people with sickle cell are favored, protected, and are unaffected more. Identify a cultural issue related to genetics. One cultural issue that is related to genetics is the distribution and the consumption of alcohol among the natives within the reservations. In the genes of Native Americans, they do not have the enzymes to break down alcohol correctly, so it is difficult for them to become sober. Centuries ago, natives did not have any contact with alcohol until the settlers gave them alcohol for trade. For centuries, their genes haven't had contact with new substances like alcohol. Up to this modern century, even though alcohol has been introduced to the natives and their culture, their bodies haven't acquired a tolerance to alcohol consumption.